Hey guys, tonight we're leaving the comfort of soft pillows and gentle thermostats behind, and heading deep into the frigid stillness of a medieval Russian village, somewhere around the 13th or 14th century. It's the kind of morning where your breath fogs inside your own home, and the fire's gone out hours ago. You're wrapped in a fur that smells more like old soup than luxury. Your hands are numb and your eyelashes, they've frozen together. Congratulations. You're already failing this historical test. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I always love seeing the bedtime map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to silence. Not peace, just that bone-deep, muffled silence of snow, ice, and isolation. The kind of quiet that presses on your ears like water. It's still dark outside, though dawn isn't far off. Pale light seeps through the cracks in the rough wooden boards that form the single-room hut. You're lying on a low plank, more a shelf than a bed, covered in a coarse woolen blanket stuffed with straw, and you're freezing. There's no fireplace in here, just a blackened clay stove that still radiates a little heat from last night's embers. Your breath clouds out before you. The inside walls are frosted, not metaphorically, literally frosted. You can see tiny white crystals forming on the inner edges of the window shutter, and you wonder, if this is how villagers woke up every morning, how did they ever make it past breakfast? Your first challenge, move. Your joints crackle as you sit up. The wooden floor is harder than you remember. You've slept in your clothes naturally, everyone does, but the sheepskin tunic and thick linen underlayers you've borrowed feel stiff. The edges icy where your breath touched them during the night. Somewhere to your left, a bundle groans, one of your host family, maybe the grandfather, or possibly a cousin. You never quite figured out who's who. Privacy isn't much of a concept here. Your feet hit the ground and immediately regret it. The floor sucks the heat out of your soles like a leech. A pair of woven bast shoes sit near the stove. You eye them as if they might grow fangs. They're filled with moss for insulation, and still, they promise misery. You put them on. Across the room, someone's already stirring the ashes in the oven, trying to coax a little flame back to life. You can smell last night's kasha still clinging to the sides of the pot. A sour, sweet scent like fermented porridge and damp wood. No one speaks yet. There's a sacred rule at this hour. Only shivering is allowed. A rooster crows and you flinch, mostly because he's perched just above your head, inside. Yes, they bring the chickens indoors during winter. It's warmer here, if you can believe it. Also louder. Now it's your job to fetch water. Here's the thing. The village well is outside. As in, you'll need to leave the hut, into the snow, wearing those moss-filled shoes. Welcome to the morning ritual. You wrap a scarf over your head and around your mouth, following the example of the household. It smells like hay and old smoke, but it helps. Then you push open the door, or rather heave it, because snow has half buried it during the night. The wind slaps your face, your eyes water. It's not just cold, it's evil cold. The kind that peels the inside of your nose and stings your gums. Outside, the world is covered in a heavy crust of ice. The snow squeaks underfoot like styrofoam. You trudge toward the well, which is just a wooden frame over a round pit, covered with a thick wooden lid. You lift it with two hands, after knocking the frost off, and peer down. Solid. Ice. So someone's already left an axe nearby. You take it, awkwardly, and start chipping away at the top layer. This, apparently, is normal. According to scholars, maintaining access to water during Russian winters was a daily task, and a brutal one. Some wells even had to be redug if the frost shifted. No pressure. Finally, you break through enough to scoop a bit of water into the wooden bucket. Your hands are screaming, the ladle is metal, and now your glove has frozen to it. Nice. On the walk back, you pass the cow shelter. It's technically separate from the hut, but only barely. The animals need warmth too, and that means the livestock shares space with the humans more often than not. The smell? Strong, but you'll get used to it. Maybe. Back inside, the stove is breathing again. Thin smoke curls toward the ceiling, eventually finding its way out through a vent in the roof. It lingers long enough to sting your eyes and flavour your clothes. A bowl of breakfast porridge is waiting for you. Buckwheat gruel, technically. It's hot, but not what you'd call tasty. There's no salt, no sugar, just a vaguely earthy mush. Everyone eats silently, spooning it in like it's medicine. One child sneezes directly into theirs. No one comments. Honestly, you don't blame them. It's not like germs are the worst thing going around. Mainstream history agrees that mornings in medieval Russia were punishing, particularly in the winter months. The weather dictated survival, and while food, shelter and warmth were technically available, they demanded constant effort. Even getting to the point of eating warm porridge required firewood, water, and someone who didn't oversleep. According to some archaeologists, evidence of communal ovens shows just how central heat was, not for comfort but for sheer survival. Still, experts continue to debate whether this relentless grind created a sense of camaraderie or simply resignation. Was the village a tightly knit survival unit, or more of a pressure cooker with a high burnout rate? You're not sure yet. All you know is that your breath still fogs as you exhale, and it's only just sunrise. You're still rubbing warmth into your fingers when the door creaks again. Time to get dressed properly now. That means adding a few more layers to what you're already wearing, which is something between a potato sack and a burlap bathrobe. Welcome to the fashion scene of the medieval Russian village. First, you grab what looks like a stiff bark-coloured shirt. It's made of hemp, rough and scratchy like it's actively trying to exfoliate your skin into submission. You pull it over your head. It smells faintly of mould and wood smoke. Then comes a jerkin, coarsely spun wool, misshapen, and several sizes too big or too small, depending on how the last person who wore it looked. It's fastened with a leather thong tied in a knot, so complicated you'd think it came with instructions. It doesn't. Next is your outer tunic, something thicker, made from bast fibre. That's right, actual strips of bark from the linden tree. You wonder briefly if this qualifies as dressing like a tree. Base clothes were common in poorer households, and historical records suggest that people wore them with grim pride. Not because they were comfortable, they weren't, but because they worked. Kinda. You manage to get your arms through the sleeves, though they itch instantly. It's like hugging a cactus made of dish scrubbers. But hey, you look rustic. Which is good, because fashion isn't a thing here. No one's judging your silhouette. If you're warm, you've already won. Over this ensemble goes a belt, leather if you're lucky, or twisted rope if you're not. It cinches the layers together like a wrapped cabbage roll. You try to breathe. It's harder than it should be. Now come the leg wrappings. They're long strips of cloth wound tightly around each calf, like some budget version of thermal long johns. You have to tie them just right, or they'll unravel mid-step, which could be catastrophic if you're outside in the snow. You fumble through it, winding and tucking like you're bandaging invisible wounds. In some regions, these strips were so long they doubled as a primitive tourniquet, which is both impressive and mildly terrifying. Then the outer boots, leather cracked and lined with old wool that smells faintly of wet dog. They slip on with effort, mostly because your socks are literally just another piece of cloth wrapped around your foot and tied at the ankle. And no, they don't match. Not in colour, not in size, and certainly not in texture. On your head, a linen cap pulled snug and tied under the chin, and over that a hooded cloak that billows dramatically, until you realise it's really just a large square of fabric with a hole for your head. Functional, not fashionable. Women, you notice, wear layers too, but differently. They're wrapped in sarafans, sleeveless overdresses, or shapeless wool dresses bound with belts. Married women wear headscarves, sometimes 2 or 3 layered together. The colours vary, but not for trend's sake. Dyes were expensive and rare. Browns, greys, and faded greens dominate like some medieval earth tone catalogue. Fringe fact, some garments were passed down for generations, repaired until more patched than original cloth. In fact, clothing often doubled as inheritance. That itchy vest you're wearing could have belonged to a great-grandparent. If that doesn't scream heirloom, nothing does. Scholars remain divided on just how early and how widespread bass clothing really was. While many agree that it saw regular use in northern and rural communities, especially in the colder months, others suggest its presence was likely overstated in literature and exaggerated in folk memory. Either way, it itches, and you don't care about academic debates right now. You just want to stop scratching. Getting dressed isn't a private act. The hut, after all, is one large room. Everyone sees everything. The villagers aren't modest about it. Life's too cold for shame. But you haven't quite adapted yet, and you flinch a little as you notice a pair of eyes watching you knot your belt. An old woman stirring something in a pot and silently judging your layering technique. She doesn't say a word, just clucks her tongue. Once. To be fair, she's wearing what looks like 5 layers, and still seems unimpressed with the insulation. She throws a sheepskin over her shoulders and waves for you to follow. The day's not waiting. But first, you're handed a knife. It's not ceremonial. It's not even especially sharp. It's just yours now. Every villager carries a blade. Not for violence, though that's always an option, but for utility. You'll use it to cut rope, shave kindling, scrape frozen mud from your shoes, and maybe fend off a squirrel with attitude. It's multi-purpose. Tucked into your belt beside a pouch filled with bread crusts, your new knife makes you feel slightly less helpless. Only slightly. As you step back outside, layered up like a cabbage in battle gear, you realise the air still slices your nose. But you're sweating now under the bark fibre sauna you're wearing, and the moisture immediately begins to freeze under your arms. Ah, medieval life, the art of being simultaneously hot and cold. You hear laughter from behind one of the huts. 2 children are having a snowball fight, but it looks more like a battle. The snowballs are dense, packed like bricks, and they hurl them with precision born of long winters and 0 toys. One of them smacks a pig in the side. The pig squeals and bolts. No one seems surprised. You'll learn quickly that in this village, clothing isn't protection. It's participation. You're expected to be out there, layered and itchy, working with everyone else. If you're cold, tough luck. If you're uncomfortable, even better. Discomfort builds character, or frostbite, but mostly character. You may be dressed now, more or less like a medieval onion with anxiety, but there's no time to admire your work. Nature's calling, loudly. And unlike modern life, there's no porcelain throne or warm seat waiting for you. Just the morning ritual dreaded by every villager, especially in winter, the trip to the latrine. You hesitate, hoping no one noticed. They did. One of the older boys gives you a knowing smirk, then jerks his head toward the edge of the yard. Yammer, he says. The pit. And that's what it is. A pit. Maybe if you're lucky it has 3 wooden planks forming a makeshift seat. Maybe not. Either way, you're headed there, and it's going to be a deeply humbling experience. The snow crunches as you walk. Your breath is still a cloud and your nose is running but too frozen to drip. The outhouse, if you can even call it that, leans precariously on one side like it's trying to escape its job. It's basically a shed, barely taller than you, with slats that let in wind like someone designed it with discomfort in mind. You push the door open. A rush of stinging, nose-curling air hits you. Worse than outside. There's no light, no insulation, and definitely no privacy. There's a hole, a bucket, some straw, a frozen something that you pretend not to notice. In you go. Now, we could spare the details, but let's just say you're not exactly settled into luxury. The wooden seat is painfully cold. Your body clenches instinctively. You understand now why villagers often refer to this moment as braving the wind. One hasty sneeze and you might end up toppling sideways into a memory you'll never erase. This is where you learn a peculiar historical tidbit. Many outhouses in cold climates used moss instead of paper. Not soft, springy moss. No, it's crunchy, icy, borderline hostile moss. Toilet luxury wouldn't grace this land until the late 19th century, and even then, it skipped many rural villages entirely. You finish up quickly, or as quickly as biology will allow in sub-zero temperatures. You retie your layers, step out into the snow, and immediately feel your knees thank you. One experience richer, spiritually poorer. On your way back to the hut, you pass a pile of last year's ashes. It's not trash, it's insulation. Villagers scatter ashes around the base of homes to reduce wind creep and ward off vermin. You wonder briefly if they'd work on social discomfort. Doubtful. Inside, everyone pretends you didn't just return from the pit of shame. You're handed a hot rock from the stove, wrapped in cloth, and told to sit on it. Not as punishment. It's just the fastest way to thaw a soul. Then comes chore delegation. A grey-haired matriarch points at you, then gestures toward a bucket and a path leading behind the goat pen. Another bathroom? Number firewood. Because you, the outsider, are currently the most disposable labour available. You trudge behind the hut and find the wood pile. It's half buried in snow. Splitting axes sit nearby, embedded in a stump like medieval Excaliburs. You grab one, position a chunk of birch and swing. The axe bounces. The wood doesn't even blink. You try again. This time, the blade sticks. Halfway, and refuses to come out. You put your foot on the stump and yank. The axe comes free, so does your balance. You land in the snow with the dignity of a tumbling scarecrow. A small boy, maybe 7, appears beside you. He picks up another axe, splits a log in one clean motion, and shrugs like it's no big deal. He walks away. You think you might cry. As you chip away at the woodpile, you start to understand something fundamental. In this village, if you don't do your part, you're not just lazy, you're dangerous. People depend on each other to keep warm, keep fed, and keep alive. A weak link in winter isn't just annoying, it's a death sentence. Cooperation isn't optional, it's baked into the snow. Historians agree that village life in medieval Russia was deeply communal. Survival depended on shared labour and mutual responsibility. But experts still debate whether this structure fostered true equality or simply redistributed suffering in smaller doses. After all, someone still had to chop the wood while others supervised. By the time you've managed 4 measly logs, your fingers are stiff, your nose is dripping again, and your back feels like it's been stepped on by a polite horse. You drag your bucket of wood toward the hut. No one applauds, no one even nods. This is just life. Inside, the room is warmer now. The stove is working harder, fed by your suffering. One of the older boys sniffs and says something in a tone that suggests mockery. You catch the word gorodskoy, city person. Ouch! But you're beginning to understand their rhythm, the unspoken rules, the fact that everyone here wakes before dawn, uses the same pit, fights with the same wood, and still finds a way to laugh before midday. You, however, are still reeling from the realization that you almost fell into a frozen latrine. By now your hands are half thawed, your pride is mostly gone, and your stomach is, somehow, growling. Time for breakfast. Or rather, zavtrak, though don't expect pancakes or fruit. This is medieval Russia, not a bed and breakfast in the Alps. You're about to experience the humblest of morning meals. Thin, grainy gruel. The older woman, probably the matron of the household, though no one's bothered to explain family roles to you, pulls a cast-iron pot from the side of the stove. It looks ancient, possibly eternal. Its bottom is blackened from decades of soot and boiling water. She lifts the lid. A puff of steam escapes, briefly softening the smoky chill of the room. Inside, kasha. Technically, it's buckwheat porridge, but that word feels too fancy for what's in front of you. It's beige-grey, a little watery, and flecked with something that might be onion, or might be hope. She ladles some into a clay bowl and shoves it toward you. No spoon. You get a carved wooden scoop instead, with bite marks and what looks like a splinter stuck in the handle. You're not even mad, you're just glad it's cleanish and vaguely functional. You take your first bite. It's hot, almost too hot, and tastes like boiled earth, bland, chewy, and mildly sour as if the buckwheat resents being eaten. But it's warm, and it fills your stomach. That's good enough for now. Others eat quickly and quietly. Slurping is not only tolerated, but expected. A toddler hurls a fistful of porridge across the room. No one reacts. A man with a thick beard wipes his mouth with his sleeve and mutters something about the weather. Another woman picks dried bits from her teeth using a chicken feather. You, meanwhile, try not to gag on the texture. This is the heart of the medieval Russian breakfast. Functional, frugal, and fiercely forgettable. Mainstream historians agree that for most peasants, meals were dictated by 2 things: availability and necessity. Buckwheat was favoured because it grew well in poor soils and didn't mind the cold. In a world without refined sugar, spices, or access to imported luxuries, food was less about pleasure and more about survival. If it filled you up and didn't kill you, it was a success. That said, you do spot a tiny surprise, a single preserved plum, split in half and passed among the family like communion. You get the stem, the beverage of choice, kvass, barely fermented rye water. It fizzes faintly, smells like vinegar and wet bread, and tastes like betrayal. But it has calories, and in this place that's currency. Someone knocks over their bowl, and the dog, small, shaggy, suspiciously rat-like, sprints to the scene. It snarls at you for looking. You look away. Breakfast ends as abruptly as it began. The bowls are rinsed with hot water and wiped with straw. You wonder if this straw is then used for bedding, or maybe the outhouse. Probably both. You glance toward the door, hoping someone might announce nap time like in kindergarten. No such luck. The matron is already wrapping her shawl and the older boys are strapping on belts and slinging woven sacks over their shoulders. They're going to the fields, and guess what? You are too. But before anyone leaves, there's one more step. A blessing. Everyone gathers around the stove. The eldest man, his beard is basically a snow-dusted broom, murmurs a short prayer in Old Church Slavonic. You don't understand the words, but the cadence is calming. He bows. Everyone crosses themselves. Then they file out, single file, into the snow. This quiet ritual, it turns out, is more than just tradition. Scholars believe these household prayers helped center families in a world full of uncertainty. They weren't purely religious, but a kind of psychological armor against the cold, the famine, and the bears. Yes, actual bears. We'll get to that later. Outside, the sun is fully up now, but you'd hardly know it. The sky's pale and flat like an overcooked pancake. You squint through your itchy hood. Everything's white, grey, and silent, except the crunch of boots and the occasional grunt from the oxen dragging a wooden sled. You're handed a wooden rake, not for raking leaves, those are long gone, but for levelling snow along the trail. Apparently this makes it easier to pull the sleds. It feels a little like shoveling sugar with a fork. Inefficient and slightly absurd. Someone passes you a piece of hard black bread wrapped in linen, field snack. You tuck it into your belt next to the knife. At this point your waist is less of a fashion zone and more of a survival toolkit. Then begins the walk. It's not short. The fields are a solid kilometre away, maybe more. The path isn't cleared, it's simply walked on enough times to count as a trail. Along the way, you pass a small shrine. Just a wooden post with an icon nailed to it, half covered in frost. Everyone crosses themselves again. You follow suit badly. Halfway there, you trip over a frozen root, fall face first into the snow. Again. No one helps. A boy chuckles. You're not mad, just numb. Quirky fact. Villagers sometimes left small food offerings at these shrines to appease wandering spirits. Bits of bread, scraps of meat, even coins frozen into the wood. You glance at your bread pouch and make a mental note to hold it tight. Eventually the fields come into view. Wide, open, and empty. There's no green, no growth, and absolutely no hope of harvesting anything today. But that's not the point. You're prepping, mending fences, clearing debris, and generally proving that you still exist. It's exhausting. And you haven't even done anything yet. You arrive at the field expecting crops, or at least something to touch that isn't just snow and regret. But this isn't a time for planting, and it's sure not a time for harvesting. No, your task today is more existential. Maintain the land so it doesn't forget you exist. The field itself is flat, crusted with ice and snow, with the skeletal remains of last year's stalks poking through like the ribs of a long-dead animal. You stare at it and think, there's no way this is useful, and yet the villagers get to work, because in medieval Russia, even a useless-looking field is still your lifeline. You're handed a wooden pole with an iron tip. It's a kind of prying stick, and your job, at least today, is to loosen the ice-packed dirt along the edges of the plot where the water gathers. Why? So it doesn't refreeze into a massive block and choke the soil for spring. Seems reasonable. Feels like punishment. You begin jabbing at the ground, every thrust jarring your shoulder. The ice cracks occasionally, but mostly it just shrugs off your effort. A man nearby is doing the same thing, only faster. With one hand, while eating bread, he offers you no advice, just a grunt. Welcome to Mentorship, Slavic edition. This kind of field preparation varied from village to village, especially in winter. Some would spread ashes or manure to insulate the soil. Others believed walking the borders of the field in specific patterns kept spirits or misfortune at bay. You're not doing any of that, just stabbing frozen earth like it owes you money. After about half an hour, your hands are blistered and your knees feel like they've been ground into porridge. The snow has soaked into your socks, which no longer feel warm, only squishy. The sun, weak and uninspired, casts a faint light that reflects off the snow and bounces into your eyeballs with malicious intent. A woman approaches, dragging a sled with a broken wheel. She mutters something that sounds both like a greeting and a warning. You help her straighten the sled. In exchange, she gives you a dried fish. It's cold, it's stiff, it smells like medieval vengeance. You nod gratefully. Then comes the goat. It's not your goat, but it clearly has beef with you. It trots into the field from somewhere behind the tree line, makes eye contact, and begins headbutting your hip with the tenacity of a tax collector. You try to step aside. It follows. The woman chuckles. "Stepan's goat," she says. "He likes foreigners." You're not comforted. The villagers start talking about spring, quietly, like a promise that might break if said too loud. You catch fragments. Planting thyme, thaw, first mushrooms. It's still months away, but the dream of it fuels their movements. According to mainstream historical consensus, the Russian agricultural year was one of incredible hardship and calculated guessing. Without modern tools or accurate calendars, peasants relied on folklore, moon phases, and inherited routines. Some say they used melted snow patterns to guess the health of the soil. Others claim they read frost cracks on trees. The jury's still out on how effective these methods were, but clearly they did something right. Most of them lived long enough to be annoyed by goats. Now, as the sun begins to climb lazily toward its midday arc, someone blows a horn, short, low, and flat in tone. Break time. Thank the saints. You shuffle toward a small grove where the villagers gather. They've dug a shallow trench in the snow and lined it with straw. This is your seat. You sit. It's not comfortable. You don't care. Lunch consists of black bread, a sliver of lard, and more kvass. The bread is so dense you could use it as a weapon. The lard is, well, it's pure fat. But it tastes oddly good, salty, slippery, and warm once it hits your tongue. Your body doesn't protest. It celebrates. Calories are gold. You ask politely if anyone wants to trade their lard. No one laughs. That was a test. You failed. There's chatter now, some of it animated. Two women gossip in a corner. You pick up the word witch. It seems someone's cow is sick and a local healer is being blamed. A man with a crooked nose spits in the snow and says something about garlic wards. The others nod. Quirky fact. Many villagers believed that certain illnesses were caused not by bacteria, a word they'd never heard, but by eye contact, envy, or improperly buried bones. Some even wore amulets made from bones or teeth to ward off invisible misfortunes. You consider asking for one, just in case the goat returns. Someone stands and stretches, breaks over. Now it's your turn to help repair a section of fence. You're handed a hammer. It's more like a blunt stone tied to a stick, but it works. You wedge dry birch branches into the frame and secure them with strips of bark. No nails, just technique, which you do not have. The fence collapses. You look around. No one reacts. Someone starts humming. You pretend it never happened. You glance back at the fields, endless and quiet. This whole day so far, this entire morning, has been about preparing for something you may never see. Seeds you won't plant. Harvests you won't touch. But in this village, preparing the land is a form of prayer. A bet against the next winter. A statement of existence. You're part of that now, blisters and all. It's around midday now, but the light hasn't gotten any warmer. If anything, it's sharper. Cold sunshine that slices across the snow like it's trying to make a point. Your boots are soggy. Your shoulders ache from the ice stabbing incident, and your stomach is eyeing the last crumb of black bread you tucked into your belt like it's a long-lost friend. You assume the worst is over. You assume incorrectly. Today, you're helping with sowing. Yes, in the snow. You squint at the frozen ground. Nothing about it says seed me. But apparently in medieval Russia, preparation never stops. Even if there's a foot of ice crusting the soil, you still show up and pretend the world will one day be warm again. A young man hands you a linen pouch filled with dried peas. They rattle softly like bones or broken dreams. He grunts and gestures at the field. You're supposed to scatter them, not plant, just scatter. Seems ridiculous, right? But here's the twist. According to some regional traditions, mock sowing was a real thing. During mid to late winter, villagers would toss symbolic handfuls of seed across the snow as a hopeful gesture to the land. Not exactly farming, more like a folkloric pep talk. Some historians claim this was a way to test thaw depth and rodent activity. Others say it was rooted in old pagan customs, rituals meant to wake the earth before spring. Scholars remain divided on how widespread or functional it really was. But one thing's clear, it gave people a sense of control. You, meanwhile, just feel silly. You dip into the pouch, grab a handful, and toss the peas. They land with a pathetic sprinkle. Some vanish into the snow, others bounce off rocks. One hits a goat. It stares at you, offended. You try again, this time with more flourish. A wide arc, like a wizard flinging spells. A few peas scatter nicely. You pretend that was the plan. Around you, the others do the same. No one's smiling, but they seem calmer, focused. Like this quiet, rhythmic act is a form of meditation. Or maybe muscle memory passed down over generations. You overhear a whispered story from one of the older women, about a season, years ago when the snow didn't melt until June. The whole crop failed. People ate bark, boiled leather, even clay. You think she might be exaggerating, but then again, maybe not. The hunger years are etched deep into folk memory here. Not just as stories, but as shapes in the land. Fields planted with desperation. Gardens where weeds were once a delicacy. Cellars that were once hiding places for pickled hope. There's a lull in the activity. People gather near a wooden marker at the edge of the plot. It's carved roughly, with runes or maybe Cyrillic so faded they look like cracks. They bow their heads. No one speaks. Later, someone tells you it marks the burial place of a child. One lost during the Great Frost, they say. No one remembers which year. Just that the frost came early and left late. Quirky fact. In some regions, it was common to bury infants in the very fields where families grew their crops. Part spiritual protection, part tragic practicality. The earth, after all, was both womb and tomb. It held everything, including grief. You feel the cold a little deeper now, not just in your fingers, but in your ribs. Back to work. You're given a tool now, more like a wooden claw than a rake. Your job is to scratch lines into the snow, vaguely resembling furrows. Why? So the real sewing, when it comes, won't feel so daunting. It's like training for a race that hasn't been announced. The tool snags on roots, rocks, and once, a partially frozen turnip. You dig it out. It's shriveled, but not rotten. A woman pockets it without a word. Finders keepers. Eventually someone calls a halt. The sun's starting to dip again. You've been outside for hours and you're not sure which hurts more, your thighs or your self-esteem. On the walk back you notice how everyone walks with slightly bent knees leaning forward. Not from fatigue, but instinct. Walking upright and straight in the snow wastes energy. Everything here is calculated, even posture. Your breath fogs again. You count the wisps. One for every dumb pea you threw, one for every blister. One for the goat still watching from a snowbank like a furry sentinel of your failures. As you approach the village, you hear distant barking, then howling, not the domestic kind. Wolves, plural. No one panics. They glance toward the tree line and move a little faster, but there's no screaming, no weapons drawn. Wolves are part of the landscape, like the snow, like the hunger, like you at this point. You're ushered into a shed, not the main hut, but a smaller one. Inside you find bundles of straw, a few barrels, and what looks like someone's winter boots, still with feet in them. Just a napper, don't worry. A fire is lit in a small stove, not big, just enough to thaw hands. Someone passes around a flask. You sip. It burns. Stronger than kvass, not quite vodka. It tastes like fermented despair. They call it samagon, homemade liquor. Illegal in many regions, but omnipresent anyway. It warms your chest like a slow sunrise. You don't even notice your knees stop hurting until they do. You lean back against a bale of hay and close your eyes for a second. Just a second. You're not asleep. You're, marinating. When you open them again, the room has dimmed. Someone is humming. Someone else is sharpening a blade. Quiet sounds. Snow muffled. Breath soft. You're not warm, but you're not freezing anymore. Progress. You're back outside now, barely rested and not even remotely ready, when someone shoves a bundle into your arms and mutters a command. You don't catch the whole sentence, but the word road, rings clear enough. Congratulations. You've been volunteered for a supply run to the next village. Shouldn't take more than an hour, someone says, which is Russian for. It'll take half the day, and you might die on the way. The path is marked only by a depression in the snow, leading into a thicket of trees with frost-covered trunks and heavy silence. Your companions for this trip, a teenager with a crossbow the size of a small door, and a middle-aged man who chews birch bark like gum. You trust neither. They load a sled with a few sacks, flour, dried fish, maybe salt to trade, and hook it up to a single mangy horse that looks like it's debating retirement. You're given a stick, not to walk with, to wave at the horse. It's motivational. As the three of you set off, the cold hits differently out here. Deeper, wilder, like the air hasn't been spoken into for 100 years. The trees groan, the snow creaks, and somewhere a distant crack echoes like a snapped bone. The road isn't a road, it's a trench carved through snowbanks by repetition and luck. Roots jut out like tripwires, frozen puddles glitter like booby traps. You cling to the sled's side with one hand and the stick with the other, feeling like a poorly dressed extra in a survival documentary. At one point, the teenager points ahead. "Medved," he says. "Bear," you freeze. He shrugs. "Old tracks." "Oh, cool." You still glance nervously into the trees for the next 20 minutes, certain every branch is a snout. Fringe fact, some medieval Russians believed bears were half human, cursed men who fled into the forest and forgot how to walk upright. Others treated them as gods of the woods, punishable to kill, unless you were starving, in which case the moral code conveniently melted like snow over fire. Speaking of melting, your boots are beginning to leak again. You haven't sat down since sunrise and your thighs feel like boiled noodles, except colder and angrier. After what feels like an hour of dragging, grunting, slipping, and occasional squirrel-based jump scares, you reach the halfway point, a stream. Frozen solid, but dangerous all the same. The horse hesitates. The man with the birch bark steps forward and taps the ice with the butt of his axe. It echoes, hollow, delicate. "We go quick," he says, and you do. Fast across the ice, one at a time, the sled wheels rattling like bones in a jar. You imagine slipping, breaking through, freezing into a statue before anyone even notices you're gone. No thanks. You walk faster. Beyond the stream, the trees part slightly, revealing a clearing dotted with black stumps. Evidence of charcoal makers, or just villagers trying to survive last winter. There's a graveyard for trees, and it feels like one for people too. Your companions don't talk much, only when necessary. The teen, finally warming up to you, shares a story about a man from his village who tried to ride a pig during a blizzard. You're not sure if it's a joke or local legend. Either way, the pig survived. The man didn't. Another hour passes. The sun is a smudge in the sky now, weak and sideways. Just when you think your toes might officially file for divorce, you see smoke in the distance, a thin trail curling into the air. The other village is even smaller than yours. Just a few clustered huts, a crooked chapel, and what looks like a collapsed shed doubling as a chicken pen. A child with no pants runs by, no one stops him. You approach the main hut and knock. A woman answers, wide-eyed, holding a baby in one arm and a knife in the other. Her expression softens when she sees the man behind you. Apparently they know each other. You don't get introductions, just a shove inside. Warmth, finally. This house is better insulated, less drafty. You smell stewed turnip and boiled leather. It's not awful. You're invited to sit on a stump by the stove while the adults barter. Fish for eggs, flour for soap, salt for something you don't recognise, possibly goat-related. One of the children approaches and stares at you like you're a painting. You wave. She runs away. There's a moment where you just breathe. Let the fire soak into your skin. Someone hands you a mug of hot beet broth. It's pink, a little chunky, but delicious. You would drink 10. Mainstream historians note that rural villages often depended on one another like lifelines, bartering supplies, sharing news, and sometimes even marrying off children to keep bloodlines fresh. But they also competed fiercely. Resources were tight. Pride was tighter. Sometimes the same hands that traded food might later swing an axe in dispute. Your group doesn't linger. Within half an hour, the sled is reloaded with new goods. Some wrapped, some still squirming, and you're back on the trail. The walk home feels longer, colder, darker. The light's leaving fast now. Snow begins to fall. Soft flakes that melt on your nose before they can freeze your soul. A small mercy. You think you see something move in the trees. You don't say anything. Back at the village, the others greet you like returning luggage. No fanfare, no firework parade. Just a nod and someone pulling the goods off the sled. The teenager grins. "Tomorrow we fix roofs," he says, then walks away. Your soul cries a little. You've barely stumbled out of the cold when someone herds you, gently but firmly, toward the main hut again. No one says lunchtime, but the smell wafting from inside makes your stomach sit up and beg like a well-trained dog. Inside, the hut is dim and smoky, the windows crusted with frost. A flicker of light pulses from the hearth's embers, casting shadows that make everyone look like they've emerged from a folk tale. You cough as you walk in, your eyes watering almost instantly. It's not just wood smoke, it's everything smoke. Dung, straw, moss, pine resin, and probably goat hair. You'd bottle the smell if you wanted to sell medieval despair as a perfume. There's no chimney, just a smoke hole in the ceiling. It's half blocked with snow, so instead of escaping, the smoke swirls and lingers like it's paid rent. You duck low, instinctively, as you make your way to the corner of the room. A woman hands you a bowl without looking. You say thank you. She doesn't respond. You peer into the bowl. It's soup, sort of. A warm, sludgy broth floats with cabbage, barley, and what might be meat, or just a very committed root. It's steaming hot, which is all you care about. You slurp eagerly. It tastes okay, earthy, a little sour. You get a tiny sliver of pork fat near the bottom and feel like you've won a raffle. You try to eat slowly, copying the others, but your body has other ideas. You haven't had a proper meal in what feels like a lifetime. You shovel the soup down like it's the last edible substance on earth. Across from you, a boy watches with amusement. He whispers something to the girl beside him, who bursts out laughing. You glance down and realise you've been using the ladle backwards. Of course, no one corrects you. They're too polite or too entertained. One man smacks his lips and sets down his bowl, muttering a brief prayer. It's automatic, worn into his bones. Another grabs a crust of bread from a communal cloth and dunks it into the remaining soup. You do the same. The bread is dry, but the broth softens it just enough to make it edible, a miracle in miniature. Historians agree that midday meals in rural Russia were modest but hearty. Soup, or shchi, was a daily staple, often simmered over days using whatever could be spared. Cabbage was common, meat was not. If you got both, you were practically nobility. But here's the kicker. Many villagers didn't eat with the fire. They ate by it, away from the heat, to conserve fuel. That cosy campfire vibe you imagined? Pure fantasy. Firewood was gold. Every splinter counted. You glance at the fire now. It's just embers. Enough to warm your toes and nothing more. As you finish the last of your soup, someone claps their hands. A signal. It's chore time again. There's no real rest in this village. Just warm pauses between cold obligations. You're handed a spindle. Not a hammer, not an axe. A spindle. You stare at it like it might bite. The older woman who fed you earlier raises an eyebrow. Priya Dani, she says, spinning. She pats the wool pile beside her and gestures for you to sit. You do, nervously. Welcome to domestic labour. Turns out you're helping process wool. Or more accurately, you're tangling wool while she fixes everything you ruin. She's patient, but in the way a tired librarian is patient with a child using the microfiche machine upside down. You try to twist the fibres, like she does, into a thread. Your fingers are too clumsy, your rhythm is wrong, the thread snaps. Again, and again. You look up. She sighs and takes the spindle, spins it once. Perfect. Of course. She chuckles, though. A small laugh, raspy but not unkind, then hands it back to you. You try again. Fun fact, spinning wasn't just a household chore, it was regulated by local custom law. Women were often expected to meet specific quotas of thread production, especially in the off-season. Some regions even required unmarried women to display their spindle work publicly, like a medieval resume. No pressure. Around you, others spin, sew, patch, and hum. It's oddly soothing, despite your consistent failure. You realise you're participating, not just surviving. That feels different. The conversation turns casual, gossip mostly. You catch words, marriage, illness, a broken fence, someone's pig who's been wandering too much. It's the medieval equivalent of checking your village's group chat. Someone mentions a domovoi, a household spirit, a guardian, mischievous but protective. They say he hates clutter, loves porridge, and once braided a man's beard while he slept. You assume this is folklore. Then you look at everyone's dead serious faces. They believe it. Quirky tidbit. Many Russian peasants left small offerings for their domovoi, bread, salt, or even a bit of vodka. In return, the spirit kept fires from going out and livestock from vanishing. Ignore him, though, and your week could go very, very wrong. You glance around the hut. In the corner beside the stove sits a small shelf with a lump of black bread and a pinch of salt. It clicks. Someone once said, "Every Russian home has three masters, the man, the woman, and the domovoi." You're starting to believe it. Eventually your thread gets better. Not good, but not breakable. You hold up a spindle length of string, proud. The woman grunts and nods. It's the medieval equivalent of a high five. As the sun slants low through the frosty window, someone opens the door and lets in a gust of snow-dusted air. A rooster inside the hut screeches. The goat bleats in protest. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks at nothing. You set down the spindle and flex your aching fingers. One of the children is tugging at your sleeve. She holds up a crude doll, stuffed with straw, tied with twine, dressed in a scrap of red cloth. She wants you to play. You smile, exhausted, and nod. Why not? After all, spinning thread and slurping cabbage soup is probably the most restful part of your day. The spinning lesson leaves your arms sore and your dignity frayed, but there's no time to wallow. You're pulled to your feet by a girl barely taller than your elbow and handed a bundle of rags. She points toward a wooden frame leaning against the far wall, half hidden in the smoky gloom. It's a loom, not the kind you're thinking of, sleek, upright, and lovingly oiled. This thing is rough, tilted, missing pieces, and definitely older than you. It groans when you touch it. You groan back. Weaving, as it turns out, is a whole different beast from spinning. With spinning, you just twisted wool and hoped it didn't fall apart. With weaving, there's math, and knots, and angry threads that want nothing more than to tangle themselves into a dimension you don't understand. The same woman from earlier, your accidental mentor, comes over and claps her hands. She points at the loom, then makes weaving motions in the air like she's conducting a symphony of string. You nod like you understand. You do not understand. She starts the setup for you, tightening the warp threads, feeding a shuttle through, beating the weft into place with a handheld beater that looks suspiciously like a weapon. You watch, wide-eyed. This isn't just housework, it's strategy, like fighting a war made entirely of wool. Once she hands you the shuttle, things go south quickly. You tangle the threads, the shuttle slips, you weave the weft over the warp instead of through it. At one point, you somehow loop your sleeve into the loom and almost trap yourself like a fly in a web of shame. The old woman mutters something under her breath. You catch the word nedotepa, a clumsy fool. You accept it. But here's where things get interesting. In this community, weaving isn't just busy work, it's governed by custom. There are rules, who can weave what, how patterns are chosen, what symbols are safe. Cross the line and you might not just offend a neighbour, you might offend the spirits, or worse, the village elder. That's when he arrives. He pushes open the door with the kind of dramatic silence that only respected elders can pull off. His beard is white, long and forked, like a particularly judgmental goat. His coat is made of sheepskin, stiff with age and probably ancient bacon grease. He enters like he owns the concept of time. Everyone straightens up. Even the chickens get quieter. He surveys the room, eyes scanning every corner. Then they land on you, on your terrible attempt at weaving. The limp, tangled thread, the crooked shuttle clutched in your hand like a crime weapon. He frowns. Then he steps forward, slowly. The crowd holds its breath. He looks at your work, then back at you. His eyebrow rises in a way that could freeze soup. He says something sharp. You don't catch the words, but the tone is clear. You've done something wrong. The old woman jumps to your defense. She waves her hands, explains something quickly. You catch the words, newcomer, city-born, and barely functional. Okay, maybe not that last one, but it was implied. The elder doesn't seem convinced. He asks a question, something about the banya, the village bathhouse. You blink. What does weaving have to do with bathing? Apparently everything. You hear murmurs around you, words like spirit, offence, and forgot to bow. Someone gasps. Let's pause here. According to Slavic folklore, the bannock, a bathhouse spirit, was extremely particular. You were supposed to leave offerings, soap, water, even a whispered apology before entering. If you didn't, well, unlucky things could happen. Scalding water, slipping on soap, or just catching a cold that never left. Some scholars believe these stories were exaggerated to enforce hygiene routines in a time when bathing was risky and rare. Others argue the rituals around the banya were deeply spiritual, Part healthcare, part sacred ceremony. The jury's still out. Back to you. Apparently, on your brief bathhouse visit yesterday, you failed to honour the bannock, and now your weaving misfortune is seen as proof of supernatural offence. The elder asks you a question, his tone less harsh now, more curious. You panic. You answer, "Da," with a hopeful shrug. He blinks, then grunts. The room bursts into laughter. The tension breaks. Even the old woman laughs, a dry wheeze like a breeze through cracked wood. Someone claps you on the back hard enough to dislocate your soul. The elder chuckles, shakes his head, and mutters something about soft hands and city lungs. You've been spared. For now. As he exits, everyone goes back to work, but with lighter spirits. Someone hands you a corrected shuttle. You're back at the loom. Your threads are slightly less tangled. You can breathe again. You spend the next hour threading fabric and dodging chickens. You learn to pass the shuttle properly. You even make a line that looks almost intentional. The old woman nods approvingly. You're still bad, but you're better. Fringe detail. Some villagers believed that if a spirit got tangled in bad weaving, it could curse the cloth. That's why patterns were kept clean, symmetrical, and repetitive, to confuse evil and invite harmony. Looking at your work, you're not sure if you're confusing spirits or just anyone with eyes. The day fades quickly. Outside, the wind howls like a lonely wolf. You glance at the door, half expecting the elder to reappear, riding a bear and demanding penance. Instead, someone brings in firewood. Life moves on, dinner's being prepared. You smell onions sizzling, probably in lard, and a hint of beets. You realise you're starving. Again. Your first loom experience? Mostly shame, some thread, and a brief public shaming by a man who looked like he punched time for a hobby. You'll take it. Evening descends like a damp wool blanket, slow, heavy, and a little smoky. Outside, the sky is turned from silver to slate, the kind of sky that doesn't set so much as settle, like it's tired too. You've just sat down, legs aching from a day of botched weaving and spirit-related accusations, when a door slams open. It's the elder again. Of course it is. He strides into the hut, flanked by two younger men and trailed by a cloud of icy air and a goose that clearly wasn't invited. Everyone stands. You try to stand. Your knees disagree. He ignores the room and points directly at you. Here we go again. He says something rapid fire in a tone that, while not outright hostile, suggests you've committed some sort of crime. Possibly treason. Possibly fashion-related. He gestures toward the centre of the hut where the fire crackles and the smoke hole coughs like a nervous chimney. You follow, confused. Someone hands you a wooden ladle and a length of braided garlic. Uh-oh. Apparently, your offences against the bannock yesterday have escalated, or mutated, or perhaps someone just really wants to make a point. The elder launches into a story, half sermon, half cautionary tale. You catch words like bathhouse, dishonour, unrest, and alarmingly milky boils. You nod solemnly. You're not sure what's happening, but it seems polite. He pauses for dramatic effect, then gestures to a boy holding a bundle. The child unwraps it. A carved wooden icon of a naked man, clearly meant to represent the bannock. It's got goat eyes, and a frown that says, "I know what you did." They set it gently by the stove. Your motion to kneel. Fantastic. You're now part of a public penance ritual for upsetting the spirit of the bathhouse. Quirky fact. In many Russian villages, bathhouses weren't just buildings, they were liminal spaces, portals between the physical and spiritual. People believed spirits congregated there. It's why most bathhouses were built outside the main home and used at odd hours, twilight especially. The bannock, they said, hated loud noises, bad manners, and, apparently, you. You're instructed to ladle hot water onto a stone while whispering an apology. You do your best. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bannock," you mutter. The elder frowns. You try again. "Great steam-dwelling sir of soap and steam." Someone chuckles. You're handed a small crust of bread. You place it beside the icon. Another offering. Someone else offers salt. Another, a worn mitten. The elder grunts, satisfied. The room exhales. You are forgiven. Sort of. There's still tension, though, the kind that lingers like smoke in wool. You're not being banished, but the village hasn't forgotten either, so it's time for a test, a task to prove you belong, or at least that you can follow instructions without offending ancient sauna demons. The elder points to a barrel in the corner, then to you. then makes a complicated gesture that you interpret as, "Fetch this to the bathhouse and don't break anything." Easy, right? The barrel is full of water. It weighs roughly the same as guilt. You drag it, grunt by grunt, toward the door. The teenagers watch you struggle with the detached amusement of people who know exactly how hard this is and aren't going to help. Outside, it's darker now. The snow glows faintly in the moonlight, but everything else is shadows and quiet. The bathhouse is visible near the edge of the village, small, squat, and oddly sinister in silhouette. You haul the barrel along a rutted path. The cold bites harder than before. Your breath wheezes in clouds. You slip twice, catch yourself once. The second time, the barrel rolls sideways, spilling water across your boots and ensuring that your socks freeze for the third time today. At last, you reach the banya. It's still warm from earlier. Inside, steam clings to the walls. The scent of birch branches and lye hangs heavy. A bundle of veniki, birch twigs used for lashing the skin into better circulation, sits on a bench like a leafy threat. You pour the water into the heating trough, add a few coals, and stir. The hiss of the steam is immediate, loud, angry. You whisper another apology just in case. Then something strange, a gust of wind inside, not through the door, inside. The curtain flutters, the steam shifts. You shiver, not from cold, from the sense that you're not alone. You leave quickly. Back at the hut, the elder is gone, the mood has shifted. People are more relaxed now, chattering, unwrapping bundles, lighting a single tallow candle to stretch the evening. You're offered a seat. A small one, but a seat nonetheless. Someone ladles you a bowl of millet porridge with dried berries. You eat slowly this time, mindfully, as if the bannock might be watching. Mainstream history tells us that communal customs, from weaving laws to bathhouse rules, helped hold medieval villages together. In places where the state was distant and survival was local, tradition acted as both law and glue. If you broke the rules, it wasn't just bad manners, it was dangerous, especially in winter. Experts still debate whether spirits like the bannock were taken literally or just metaphorically, as tools to reinforce norms and caution against chaos. But based on how tightly your hosts wrapped your apology in ritual and steam, you suspect they meant it. As you finish your meal, a girl offers you a ribbon, red, roughly woven. You don't know what it means, but you take it. Outside, the wind howls again, but this time you swear you hear laughter in it. Probably just the teenagers. Probably. You wake with a stiff neck and a mouth full of regret. Probably from sleeping hunched on a bench beside the stove like a discarded coat. The hut is quiet except for the distant clatter of wooden wheels and a goat having a loud existential crisis outside. Someone nudges you. It's time. Market day. The village is buzzing in a way you haven't seen before. People are wrapping bundles in old cloth, stuffing sacks with dried peas, onions, wool, and things that might be turnips or very confident rocks. You're handed a bundle of your own. It's light, smells faintly of fermented cabbage, and might be soap or cheese or both. You're going to barter today. This is the medieval Russian equivalent of shopping, except instead of money, you bring items, hope, and enough patience to haggle with someone who's been mad since sunrise. The path to the market isn't long, but it's crowded. Families trudge through the snow, pulling sleds, some with wheels lashed in case the ground firms up. You travel as a group, following behind a slow-moving cart with a pig tied to it. The pig does not want to be here, you relate deeply. The market is set up in the open field outside a neighbouring village, more mud than snow, churned into an icy stew by hundreds of boots. Makeshift stalls line the perimeter, no more than wooden planks nailed to tree trunks, shaded by animal hides. It smells like meat, smoke, and old wool. In other words, authenticity. A man stands on a crate shouting about his goose feathers. Another waves a jar of beet kvass like it's an ancient relic. Two women argue over a fish. A child is trying to sell what is clearly just a stick. You're shoved forward. Your bundle is unwrapped by an older woman with one eyebrow and zero patience. She sniffs it, nods, holds up a chunk of beeswax in exchange. You hesitate. She narrows her eyes. You nod. Deal. You just made your first trade. There's no receipt, no returns. Just the lingering fear you gave up your only decent item for glorified candle fuel. Mainstream historians often highlight the social importance of markets in medieval life. They weren't just for trading goods. They were how people exchanged news, cemented alliances, and gossiped like their lives depended on it, which occasionally they did. Barter ruled the economy, especially in rural areas where currency was rare and mistrusted. Value was based on need, scarcity, and how convincing your scowl was. A bearded man offers you a bundle of dried mushrooms for your wooden comb. You're about to agree when a woman nearby mutters something about fox mushrooms and intestinal chaos. You decline, politely, then hide your comb. Someone offers you a live duck. You consider it, mostly because it stares at you with what feels like genuine judgment. You pass. You watch as two teenagers argue over a broken bell. One swears it used to belong to a church. The other claims it was stolen from a cow. A third boy just wants to hit things with it. Nearby, a crowd gathers around a man performing something that might be music on a jaw harp, or maybe just jaw-related noises. Coins are tossed. You wonder where they even came from. Quirky fact, while coins did exist, most rural Russians in this era rarely used them. Instead, items like salt, wax, and fur were the preferred mediums of exchange. In fact, there are documented cases of taxes being paid in squirrel pelts. Imagine filing your annual squirrel return. You manage to trade for a pair of socks. Wool, slightly uneven, but warm. Your feet sing a silent hymn of thanks. A boy tries to steal one before you even finish tying them to your belt. You glare. He disappears like smoke. You meet someone from another village. Bigger hat, louder voice, and an accent that makes every word sound like an insult. He offers you what he claims is a dried apple. It looks more like a dried question. You shake your head. He snorts. Friendship established. In one corner of the market, a man offers medical services. His cart features dried herbs, animal skulls, and something labelled toadstone. You don't ask questions, but you do note the man is missing 3 fingers. Then, just as you're adjusting to the chaos, it starts to snow again. Big flakes, sudden and heavy. The market shifts. Traders wrap their wares. People hurry to finish deals. A goat runs free. Always a goat. You follow your group back toward the village. Bags a little heavier. Your belt pouch jangling faintly with new acquisitions. Beeswax, 2 eggs, socks, and a mysterious salve that promises protection from spirits and rashes. As you walk, you overhear someone talking about the upcoming feast day. There's debate about whether the weather will hold. Someone mutters about bad omens. Another insists the Banya spirits have already spoken. You don't even blink anymore. This is normal now. The sky darkens quickly. Snow thickens. The wind picks up, tossing flurries sideways like angry confetti. You squint against it, trudge on, and hold tight to your socks like they're sacred. By the time you reach the village again, you're frozen, hungry, and deeply suspicious of everything in your satchel, but also oddly proud. You've survived your first medieval market. No one congratulates you. They're too busy unloading. You set your bundle down inside the hut, and someone hands you a mug of warm milk. You sip. It's slightly sour. Possibly goat. Definitely welcome. You've bartered. You've haggled. You've been judged by a duck. You're becoming one of them. The wind has died down, leaving behind a soft snowfall and a quiet that clings to the village like wool. You've just finished hanging your newly bartered socks by the stove to dry, your proudest market acquisition, when someone nudges you again. Church time. You pause, expecting singing or bells. Instead, the woman who woke you just points at your boots and says something about obedience and freezing sins. Great. You're bundled up once more, layers of scratchy wool and damp linen wrapped around your dignity like gauze on a wound, and ushered toward the centre of the village. A narrow footpath leads to a squat wooden building that resembles a barn more than a place of worship. Snow piles around its base like it's been trying to swallow the church whole for months. This is not a cathedral. This is the rural soul in log form. Inside, it's cold. Colder than outside, somehow. The walls are dark wood, soaked with centuries of smoke and silence. There are no pews, just wooden planks against the walls and standing room in the centre. The ceiling is low. Icons are tacked onto the walls, faded, flaking images of saints with wide eyes and tired halos. A candle flickers, then another. A man in a long robe steps forward. His beard is more majestic than the building. His voice is deep, slow, and unwavering as he begins the liturgy, in Old Church Slavonic. It's mesmerizing. You don't understand a word, not a single one. But the cadence rolls over you like a tide of syllables dipped in honey and smoke. The consonants crackle like pine wood in fire. The vowels stretch into strange, echoing spaces. You're not even trying to follow anymore. You're just standing, shivering, listening to ancient syllables wrap around your ears like winter wind. Mainstream historians note that Old Church Slavonic, used in Russian Orthodox services for centuries, wasn't fully understood even by many villagers attending church. It was formal, ceremonial, and preserved like an artifact. The words weren't always meant to be understood. They were meant to be felt. There's no sermon, no friendly turn-to-your-neighbour moments. This isn't a community icebreaker, it's a spiritual endurance test. You glance at the others. Everyone stands in absolute stillness. No fidgeting, no coughing. A small child sneezes and is immediately hushed with the speed of divine intervention. A goat bleats faintly outside. It is not invited in. Your knees begin to hurt. You shift your weight. The floor creaks in protest. You stop moving. Then comes the incense. A thurible swings gently from the priest's hand. It smells like pine sap and distant regret. The smoke curls up toward the rafters, where it meets the trapped breath of a dozen generations. You stare, hypnotized. You're handed a beeswax candle. You nearly drop it. Someone next to you lights it for you with a practiced flick, then nods solemnly. You nod back, as if you totally know what you're doing. Quirky tidbit. In many rural communities, candles weren't just symbolic. They were also offerings, each one made by hand, each flame a prayer. Some families would save their best beeswax for weeks to make sure their church candle burned brightest. You whisper a mental note. Don't let mine go out. The service continues. You've lost all track of time. Could be 30 minutes. Could be 3 hours. The priest drones, the candles flicker, and the icons seem to watch you with stern, loving disappointment. Then, movement. People cross themselves in a ripple. The priest steps back. A final phrase hangs in the air like frost on breath. You made it. But there's more. Someone hands you a piece of blessed bread. It's dry, crumbly, tastes like hope and old flour. You eat it silently. Then the exit begins. Orderly, slow, reverent. No one speaks until they're back outside. It's like stepping from a tomb into a breeze. You exhale, realizing you hadn't done so properly in an hour. Back in the village, the mood is lighter. The service has released something. The tension from the Bannock incident has finally cracked. You walk beside a boy who is standing next to you in church. He says something about saints, then something about dancing. You're pretty sure that's not in the scriptures, but you smile anyway. As you pass the chapel, you spot a tiny shrine tucked near the side, a wooden post with carvings and a handful of berries placed neatly on a ledge. No sign, no plaque, just quiet reverence. Experts still debate the true purpose of these folk shrines. Were they holdovers from pre-Christian beliefs, secret altars to forest spirits, or simply ways for peasants to personalize a distant faith? The line between sacred and superstitious in rural Russia was never particularly thick. You return to the hut just as a woman opens a window to air out the room. The blast of cold is immediate, but the symbolism isn't lost. Clean air, fresh spirit, reset. Dinner is already bubbling. Something with beets this time. A good sign. Red colour meant celebration, or at least not misery. You remove your boots and sit close to the stove. Someone hands you a cup of berry kvass. You sip. Sweet. Tart. Alive. You think back to the church. The strange words, the flickering icons, the way your breath felt smaller inside those walls. You didn't understand a thing, but somehow it made sense. You thought you knew what heat was. After all, you've been huddled next to stoves, carried hot rocks under your tunic, and nearly scalded yourself with beet soup. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared you for the medieval Russian banya. It starts innocently. Someone claps you on the back and says, "Time to sweat out the demons." You're not sure if they mean literal demons or just yesterday's soup. You don't ask. You're marched toward the edge of the village again, past a row of stacked firewood and a suspiciously watchful chicken. The banya, the bathhouse, is small, squat, and built entirely of wood. It looks like a storage shed with aspirations. Inside, it's dark, damp, warm, but in that your eyebrows are about to steam off kind of way. The walls drip. The floor is covered in hay. A stove squats in the corner, red-hot stones inside glowing with menace. Buckets of water sit nearby, one with birch leaves soaking in it. You're handed a twig bundle. The man next to you is already stripping. You try to keep up. Your clothes come off slowly, reluctantly, like they've fused to your skin in protest. You're down to nothing but shame and socks. The socks must go. You step inside the steam chamber. Instantly your lungs revolt. The air is thick, viscous. It doesn't just fill your lungs, it hugs them from the inside. You try to take a breath, and instead inhale what feels like spicy soup fog. Your eyes water, your skin prickles. You sit because standing would require strength you no longer possess. Then the Venic arrives. That's the bundle of soaked birch twigs, wielded now by a very enthusiastic man named Ivan. He grins. You don't. He begins lashing your back with the Venic, not hard, but rhythmically, like he's playing a drum solo on your spine. It's painful, then oddly relaxing, then painful again, a full experience. Mainstream historians describe the banya as a cornerstone of Russian life. More than just bathing, it was considered a place of purification, healing, even childbirth. Families would reserve specific days for steaming, often tied to religious holidays, birthdays, weddings, Wednesdays. Honestly, any excuse. You're handed a ladle and told to pour water on the stones. You do. Big mistake. The hiss is instant. The room explodes in heat. Steam punches you in the soul. You gasp, then immediately regret it. The others cheer. Apparently you've done something right. Then comes the plunge. You're led outside, naked, steaming like a boiled dumpling, into the snow. They tell you to lie down. You hesitate. They insist. You collapse into the snow, which feels like being hugged by 1,000 knives. Your heart forgets how to rhythm. Your skin tries to flee your body. You scream internally, maybe externally. Hard to say. Then, peace. It's shocking, this moment of stillness. The contrast between heat and ice erases every thought in your brain. You could solve math problems or see spirits, probably both. Someone laughs, you're helped up, back inside. The process repeats: steam, lash, ladle, melt, then snow, scream, recover. You lose track of how many rounds you've survived. It becomes a ritual, a rhythm, a strange sort of transcendence. Your body forgets its complaints, your mind unknots. You sit on the wooden bench, hair soaked, pulse steady, and for once, warm to your bones. A woman hands you a towel. It's more of a linen rag, but at this point it might as well be velvet. You dry off as best you can and pull your clothes back on. They feel wrong, too heavy, too real. You exit the banya a new person, or at least a cleaner, sweatier one. Scholars remain divided on just how spiritual the bathhouse experience was versus how practical. Some suggest it was merely the only effective form of hygiene available. Others argue that rituals like Venic lashing and spirit offerings gave it deeper cultural resonance. Half wellness centre, half holy temple of steam. You're leaning toward the holy temple theory. As you return to the main hut, someone pats you on the back. You realise your muscles don't hurt. Your skin feels soft. Even your frostbitten toes feel hopeful. Back inside, the atmosphere is cosy. The fire glows. The porridge simmers. A woman braids her daughter's hair by candlelight. A cat yawns from a beam above. You sit. Someone pours you a mug of hot milk with honey. It's thick, rich, and tastes like bedtime. Quirky fact: in some households, post-banya drinks were customary, usually warm milk, broth, or even kvass with herbs. It helped replace fluids, soothe the body, and mark the return from the intense cleansing. Think of it as a medieval smoothie, without the blender or fruit or choice. You lean back, cradling the mug. You're clean, you're warm, you're still vaguely terrified of Ivan. You hear laughter outside. The teenagers are daring each other to jump into a snowdrift. One does. He emerges howling. They all cheer. Even the chicken seems impressed. You catch a reflection in the metal rim of your mug. You look tired, wild-eyed, slightly pink. But there's something else there. Something calm. The banya didn't just scrub your body. It scrubbed your soul a little too. Tomorrow, you'll go back to scraping ice, dodging goats, and being accused of supernatural disrespect. But tonight, you are steamed. You are salted. You are at peace. After the bathhouse ordeal, you think maybe, just maybe, you've earned a quiet evening. You imagine curling up beside the stove, sipping warm kvass, and staring blankly into the candlelight like a very cosy vegetable. That is, until the yelling starts. Not angry yelling, not danger yelling, but the kind of raised voices that mean something weird just happened, and everyone wants to be the first to comment on it. You peek out the window. The snow reflects lantern glow, casting long shadows of people gathering near the goat pen. You throw your coat back on and shuffle outside, feet still tingling from Banya euphoria. The crowd is small but animated. A few villagers stand with arms crossed. Others whisper to one another in what sounds like a tone halfway between gossip and legal deposition. At the centre of the group is the goat. You've seen this goat before. Everyone has. It belongs to your neighbour, an older man with a permanent squint and a hat that looks like it fought a bear and lost. The goat is grey, mangy, and until today, aggressively boring. But now it's become the star of the show, because someone has accused someone else of trying to steal it. Goat theft. A capital crime? Not quite, but close enough. In a village where every piece of livestock is critical to survival, stealing, or even touching someone else's goat is like walking off with their wallet, passport, and best winter coat all at once. The accused stands on the defensive, arms flailing, voice cracking, pointing repeatedly toward the woods, as if a goat just decided to take a walk by itself. The villagers are skeptical. Goats don't take walks. They escape. They're lured. They're stolen. The elder appears again. Of course he does. He arrives with all the drama of a snowy judgment day, leaning heavily on his staff and glaring with the intensity of someone who's been interrupted mid-soup. Everyone quiets down. A brief hearing begins, right there in the snow. The goat bleats once, loudly, unhelpfully. You learn that in medieval Russian villages, accusations like this didn't go to some distant court. Justice happened locally, on the spot, often with little more than testimony, memory, and a healthy dose of superstition. Forget evidence. Truth lived somewhere between what your neighbour swore happened and what the livestock remembered. Mainstream historians point out that rural law enforcement was decentralised to the extreme. The mir, or village assembly, handled disputes, settled crimes, and decided punishments. Sometimes that meant a fine, sometimes exile, sometimes just public embarrassment and a strongly worded proverb. Tonight it's leaning toward embarrassment. Someone mentions a broken fence. Someone else insists they saw the accused near the pen. A third person brings up an incident from 3 years ago involving a suspiciously similar missing duck. You're not sure what's more amazing, that this many people care about one goat, or that they all have detailed theories about its social calendar. Eventually a compromise is reached. The goat is returned. The accused is ordered to spend the next 3 nights clearing snow from the elder's roof, a punishment that seems more symbolic than practical. Quirky detail. In some regions, goat-related disputes were so common that they inspired folk sayings like, "Don't trust a man who feeds another's goat," or "Where there's a goat, there's a lie." You suspect you've just seen both in action. As the crowd disperses, the goat is dragged home, still looking entirely unconcerned. A boy ties a red ribbon around its neck, maybe as an apology, maybe as a label. Either way, it's now officially the most watched animal in town. You return to the hut, where the air is warm and slightly tense. Everyone's buzzing from the event. 2 women are already retelling it with added drama. In one version, the goat leapt over a cart. In another, it whispered its own defence to the elder. You're handed a bowl of millet. Comfort food. A reward for surviving another evening in the soap opera that is village life. As you eat, a child climbs onto your lap with a crudely carved figurine. It's supposed to be a bear, but it looks more like a melted badger. She tells you it's the guardian of her goat. You nod solemnly and make it promise to be vigilant. She accepts this. You ask where she got it. Grandfather carved it, she says, after our last goat went missing. Of course. As the fire dies down, people begin to settle in. There's laughter now, soft and full-bellied. Someone sings a little tune about a goat and a farmer's daughter. It has far too many verses. You lie back, full and fuzzy-headed, the goat drama still echoing in your ears. Outside, the wind has picked up again, brushing against the walls like fingers tapping a lullaby. Somewhere in the dark, the goat bleats once more. For attention, probably. You wake in the middle of the night to a quiet that isn't peaceful. It's suspicious. The kind of quiet where something feels off. Your back is sore from sleeping curled on straw. Your neck aches, and there's a strange, persistent itch on your elbow that might be imaginary. You shift slightly. Something crunches. Nope, not imaginary. You sit up slowly. The others around you are sleeping, bundled in furs and layers like a pile of breathing laundry. The only light comes from a dying ember in the stove and the faint glow of moonlight creeping through a gap in the wooden shutter. You scratch your elbow again, then your shin, then your back. You lift the wool blanket to inspect your bedding, and there they are. Bugs. Real ones. Small, dark, busy. A community meeting apparently held directly under your spine. They scatter under the straw as you move. Congratulations. You've been formally introduced to medieval Russian bed life. You lie back down anyway because what choice do you have? Every surface is equally itchy. The straw mattress, if you can call it that, is really just a pile of last season's chaff held together by body weight and a vague belief in sleep. It's lumpy, uneven, and smells faintly of livestock, and it turns out you're not alone. A soft grunt nearby signals the family dog shifting beside someone's feet. A baby murmurs in her mother's arms. Somewhere above, in the ceiling beams, a chicken lets out a sleepy rustle. You stare up at the rafters and see its eyes catch the moonlight. That chicken is judging you. Sleep is elusive, not just because of the bugs, but because of the noise. The hut creaks. The wind whistles through the eaves. One of the men snores like he's trying to shake loose the last bits of his soul. And privacy, completely non-existent. The room is one unbroken space. Every cough, sniffle and sleep fart is shared by all. Fringe detail, it wasn't uncommon in this era for families to sleep in close quarters, with as many as 10 people, and sometimes their animals, all under one roof. It wasn't affection, it was insulation. Body heat helped keep everyone from freezing. You're not sure how you feel about that. You turn over. Something sharp pokes your thigh. Probably a straw needle, possibly a goat tooth. You don't ask questions anymore. Mainstream historians often describe peasant homes as functional, not comfortable. The straw beds were rarely changed, often damp and full of freeloaders, fleas, lice, beetles, and other roommates that didn't pay rent. Washing bedding was rare, particularly in winter when water was a precious resource and laundry froze faster than you could hang it. You shift again. Your elbow still itches. Someone farts, loudly. No one reacts. That's the most medieval thing of all. Eventually the noises become rhythmic, predictable. The breathing, the creaking, even the wind, all part of a strange lullaby. Your body, resigned to its itchy fate, begins to relax. You close your eyes. Then the whispering starts. It's soft. 2 voices, barely audible, somewhere near the fire pit. You can't make out the words. A man and a woman, maybe, discussing something in hushed tones. You listen harder, but the language slips past you. Could be dialect, could be worry. You catch one word, Colden, sorcerer. Okay, that's new. You stay very still. The conversation fades after a few minutes. Someone shifts, someone coughs. Silence returns. Heavier this time. Quirky fact. Night was when fears came out. Not just wolves and weather, but things. The supernatural was never far from the medieval imagination. Many believed that witches, demons, and spirits roamed freely after dark, especially in the cold months when the line between worlds grew thin. Some households placed protective charms under their pillows, small icons, bits of salt, or crosses carved into the bed frame. You check under your mattress. Just more bugs. Great. A sudden gust of wind bangs the shutter. You flinch. The chicken above clucks angrily. The dog growls. The baby stirs, then settles. You roll over again, and your elbow lands on something damp. You don't investigate. Eventually, blessedly, your body gives in. Sleep sneaks up on you slowly. The fire pops. Someone sighs. Your breath evens. Your limbs grow heavy. And though the straw scratches and the bugs march defiantly under your blanket, you drift off anyway. Because even in the most uncomfortable circumstances, exhaustion always wins. You dream of warm baths, of private beds, of socks without holes, and porridge without mystery textures. You do not dream of chickens. Outside, the wind howls gently across the village, brushing snow off rooftops and carrying secrets from one hut to the next. In here, wrapped in straw and shared air, you're just another breathing body in the great collective sleep of the village, not alone, not clean, not comfortable, but finally asleep. You wake to the sound of a spoon clinking against a clay bowl, and hushed voices, nervous ones. Morning has broken, but it hasn't done it kindly. There's no rooster this time, no laughter, just a tension in the air that feels like frost creeping under a doorframe. Someone's sick. You sit up, brushing hay from your sleeves. Your shoulders ache. Your hair is doing something unspeakable. But all of that is irrelevant when you see the huddle forming in the corner of the hut. A child is lying under a pile of wool blankets. She's pale, sweating. Her eyes flutter open and shut like candlelight. Her mother sits beside her, gently spooning a thin broth toward her lips. The girl doesn't drink. Everyone is quiet, watching, waiting. You approach slowly. The elder is already there, crouched beside the fire, muttering something rhythmic. Words you don't recognize, but they fall like a chant. He holds a string of beads in one hand and a bundle of herbs in the other. Another woman fans the air with smoke from burning juniper, waving it toward the child's face. You catch a whiff, sharp, pungent, almost sweet. It burns your nose a little. You try not to sneeze. Then someone says it. Kuto to navel pochu. Someone cast a spell. Ah, there it is. Whispers of Portia, the evil eye, a curse, a sickness born not from nature but from intention. It's not just the fever that's troubling them. It's the belief that someone caused it. You feel a chill that has nothing to do with the weather. Mainstream historians note that in many medieval Russian villages, illness wasn't always treated as a physical misfortune. Instead, it was often spiritual, social, an imbalance, a sign that someone had broken a taboo, offended a spirit, or, worse, been targeted by magic. Scholars still debate whether these beliefs were functional folk medicine, psychological coping tools, or simply expressions of fear in an uncertain world. The line between healer and witch was often razor-thin, and just as dangerous. Now, the village must decide what to do. A heated conversation begins. Fingers are not quite pointing, but glances are sharp. You hear the name of a woman who lives alone on the edge of the woods. You've seen her once, tall, hunched, eyes like storm clouds, the kind of person who doesn't make bread for feast days. Suspicious, obviously. They're deciding whether to visit her, to ask questions, or maybe to issue warnings. The mother, weeping now, clutches a small cloth doll in her lap, bound in red string filled with dried herbs, a protective charm. She holds it like it might absorb her fear if she squeezes hard enough. You sit beside the fire, unsure what to say or do. This isn't your world, this isn't your fight, but you feel the weight of it all the same. Then someone hands you a wooden cup. Inside, a strange cloudy liquid. Warm, smells like honey, vinegar, and something rooty. You sip. It's unpleasant, medicinal. You realise you're being given a countermeasure. A ward, in case you're next. Thanks. Quirky fact. Many villagers carried protective tokens, small bits of bone, carvings or crosses tied with hair, to fend off evil forces. Children were especially vulnerable, and some families kept hidden amulets sewn into clothing seams, invisible but always there. You look at the child again. Her breathing is shallow, her skin slick. Her little fingers twitch, grasping nothing. Suddenly the door creaks open. The woman from the edge of the woods enters. The air freezes. No one moves. No one speaks. She walks in slowly, her footsteps muffled by the straw. She says nothing, just looks around the room, then kneels beside the girl. The mother flinches but doesn't move. The elder watches, unmoving. The woman places her hand on the girl's forehead. Then she pulls a pouch from her coat, dried leaves, maybe bark, and drops a pinch into the broth. She stirs it once, hands the spoon back, then she stands, nods, and leaves. That's it. No dramatic hexes, no muttered threats, just presence. No one speaks for a long time. Then the child drinks, just a sip, but she drinks. The mother gasps. Someone crosses themselves. The tension lifts slightly, like a cloud moving from the sun. You exhale. Later that day you overhear someone say the woman is not a witch but not quite holy either. Someone else calls her Vedunya, a wise woman. In another context that word would mean seer. Here it's a label stuck between reverence and fear. You return to your chores quietly, glancing at the hut every so often. The child sleeps now, peacefully it seems. No one's celebrating, but hope has returned. A small flame, fragile but real. As night falls, the village feels different. Not scared exactly, but aware. You see small bundles of garlic hung in doorways, ash sprinkled at thresholds. Someone leaves a crust of bread on a windowsill. an offering, just in case. The wind picks up again, the snow begins to fall, and somewhere beyond the trees a woman walks home alone, her shadow long and strange in the moonlight. It's the next morning, and things should feel calmer. The sick child is still resting, the air's a little warmer, and someone even offers you a chunk of soft cheese, an event so rare it almost counts as divine intervention. But something's wrong. The energy in the village is twitchy, uneasy. People move quickly, eyes darting, voices lower than usual. You try to mind your business. Really, you do. But that doesn't stop it from happening. You break a rule, not a big rule, not even an obvious one, but a rule nonetheless. It happens while you're collecting kindling from the pile near the edge of the property. You're trying to be helpful. Really. You even remembered to bring the bark basket, not the woven one. That's growth, right? Then you see it. What looks like an old log tucked under the edge of the wood pile, covered in moss. Damp. You think, wood is wood, and you haul it out. Someone gasps. The elder is already walking toward you. Fast. A crowd forms. Again. The log, it turns out, is not for burning. You've just pulled out a sacred boundary marker. One of the old ones placed generations ago to protect the village from wandering spirits. Or worse, it's carved faintly, with symbols you thought were just scratches. Now everyone's acting like you tried to cook dinner using a saint's skull. You freeze, mid-log. No one yells. That's what makes it worse. The elder speaks softly, gravely, like someone delivering bad news to a man who hasn't realized he's in trouble yet. You try to explain. Didn't know. Just would. Trying to help. He doesn't respond. They decide, on the spot, to hold a tribunal. Yes, a literal village tribunal. You are the defendant. Mainstream historians agree that in the absence of centralized justice, rural Russian communities relied heavily on village councils, skods or mirs, to manage disputes. Punishments weren't just about justice. They were about harmony. An offended tradition was like a cracked beam in a house. It needed fixing before the whole thing collapsed. You're told to stand in front of the elder's hut. A bench is dragged out. The council forms, 3 men and 2 women, senior, unsmiling, wrapped in thick coats that make them look like judgmental yaks. They ask you to explain yourself. You do. Kindling. Helpful. Sorry. No one nods. They confer in low tones. One woman brings up the fact that you've survived this long, which might indicate some favour from the spirits. Another mutters something about too many accidents in 1 week. A third wonders aloud whether the goat incident somehow ties into this. The word curse floats by. You swallow. Hard. Then, a strange twist. A boy, maybe 12, steps forward. He speaks quickly, nervously. He says you helped him fix the fence last week, that you took your turn at the icy well, that you didn't complain when you were smoked like a ham in the banya. It's not a passionate defence, but it's something the council considers. Then finally the elder declares your punishment. You will dig a new boundary marker from scratch. Carve it, bless it, and place it where the old one lay, before sunset. If you don't, well, no one finishes the sentence. But you get the impression you'd regret it. You're handed a chunk of raw pine, a small knife, and a bowl of ash. The carving begins. You sit on a stump, freezing fingers wrapped around unfamiliar tools, trying to recall the faint patterns you saw on the original marker. Circles, a spiral, something that looked like a tree, or was it a hand? You improvise. Badly. A girl brings you bread. Another, a bit of wax. They're not talking to you, but they're watching. It's both comforting and terrifying. Halfway through, your fingers cramp. The knife slips. You nick your thumb. The blood smears into the wood. You panic, but a nearby boy nods solemnly. It's good luck now, he whispers. You don't ask questions anymore. Finally, the carving is done. Uneven, lopsided, but sincere. You smear the ash into the grooves as instructed and carry it reverently to the original spot. The elder meets you there. He places his hand on the new marker, then on your shoulder, then leaves. It's done. Quirky tidbit. Boundary markers in Slavic tradition were sometimes given offerings. Bread, milk, coins, particularly when newly placed. It was believed they served not just to mark territory, but to speak with the land itself. You return to the hut exhausted. Someone passes you a bowl of warm kasha and says nothing. Later that evening, you notice a bundle of garlic has been placed near your sleeping spot. A good sign. You lie back in the straw, arms aching, fingers still sticky with sap. You've been tried, judged, punished, and maybe, just maybe, accepted. You're finally beginning to understand the rhythm of this place. You've made it through goat scandals, accidental spiritual offences, and the medieval version of jury duty. You even started eating your kasha without gagging. Which is exactly why things are about to go sideways again. The sun is high, the sky a pale, cracked eggshell of winter light. You're helping move frozen root vegetables from the communal cellar, a task that involves more tripping than lifting, when you hear it. A sound, a low, heavy thud. Then another. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in a quiet, half-buried Russian village. Everyone freezes. The woman beside you drops her basket. The carrots tumble out, frozen solid and clinking like sticks of kindling. The elder, who always walks like he's got time on a leash, suddenly moves like he's 20 years younger. He mutters something under his breath and tells the children to get inside. Then someone says it. Medved. A bear. Not just a rumour. Not just prints in the snow or scat near the woods. A real living, breathing, hungry bear has wandered into the village. And guess where it's gone? Straight to the turnip pit. Of course. You follow the crowd cautiously, peering from behind a haystack as the bear becomes visible. A massive creature, fur matted with snow and mud, snout buried in the village's entire winter supply of root vegetables. The turnip pit was dug deep, lined with straw, and covered with wooden boards meant to deter casual nibbling. It is not bear-proof. Nothing here is. You watch in horror as the bear flips a board aside like it's made of feathers and pulls out a particularly juicy parsnip. The audacity. A few villagers mutter ideas. Bang pots, light torches. One suggests singing. The elder shuts that down immediately. Apparently bears are not fans of folk concerts. You ask the obvious question. Shouldn't we scare it off? A man looks at you like you've just suggested wrestling the wind. Bears in winter are not to be trifled with. They're usually asleep this time of year. If one's up and about, it's either sick, starving, or cursed, or maybe all three. No one's eager to test which. Mainstream historians note that while bear encounters were rare, they were taken extremely seriously. In some regions, people believed winter-wandering bears were omens, harbingers of disease, death, or disaster. In others, they were treated almost with religious awe, as reincarnated souls or forest spirits. Experts still debate whether these beliefs were rooted in animism or just collective PTSD from generations of livestock being stolen by furry battering rams. The bear lifts its head. Its eyes sweep over the gathered humans. You freeze. It licks its lips, then returns to the pit. You're not proud, but you whisper, "Take the cabbage, just not the potatoes." Eventually a plan forms, sort of. A small group of brave, or foolish, volunteers will try to lure the bear away from the village using meat scraps, fire, and loud noises. You are regrettably included. Why? Because you once carried a log without complaining. That's apparently qualification enough. You're given a torch, a pot lid, and a dried fish tied to a string. You do not feel confident. The group moves out, forming a loose semicircle around the bear. It looks up again, curious, maybe annoyed. One man begins clanging his pot lid like a deranged dinner bell. Another waves a piece of jerky. You hold your fish string at arm's length like it's radioactive. The bear watches. Then, astonishingly, it follows. Slowly. Staggering, really. Not sprinting. It's probably older than the elder and twice as grumpy. You lead it through the trees, away from the fields, farther and farther, until the only sound is your own wheezing breath and the crunch of heavy paws behind you. Eventually the bear stops, sniffs the ground, and collapses beside a stump like it's had enough. It doesn't follow when you retreat. The elder declares the mission a success, mostly because the turnip pit still exists. You return to the village with a hero's welcome, or at least a few nods and one overcooked beet. Later, someone sketches the bear encounter onto a piece of bark. You're drawn slightly taller and holding a spear. None of that happened, but you're not complaining. Quirky fact. In some Slavic villages, bear sightings were recorded in oral epics, passed down as family stories or incorporated into local songs. One bear might become a character for generations, blamed for everything from crop failures to bad marriages. You lie down that night to the sound of quiet murmuring. Two children reenact the bear scene with a turnip and a boot. You're flattered, a little concerned, mostly tired. The turnip pit is half empty, but morale is high. And tomorrow, you get to refill it. Because in medieval life, after the drama always comes the shovel, you wake to sore shoulders, frozen toes, and the mental image of a bear chewing on turnips like popcorn. But today is different. There's a strange buzz in the air, nervous excitement wrapped in smoke and the sound of early morning banging. Today is a feast day. You smile, expecting joy, food, music, rest. Then the chores start. Apparently feast day in a medieval Russian village does not mean holiday the way you understand it. It means you're about to do even more work, but now with religious undertones and stricter expectations. You're yanked out of your hay nest before sunrise, handed a coarse linen cloth and told to wash. Not in the banya, that would be too pleasant. No, this is ceremonial washing, a bucket of icy water behind the goat pen. One splash to the face and your soul nearly leaves your body. Afterward you're given clean but scratchy clothes to wear, festive clothes, a tunic that smells like lavender and smoke with embroidered cuffs. You're told not to spill anything on it. You immediately fear you'll spill everything. The entire village is moving, scrubbing, sweeping, baking. Children are gathering pine boughs. Women carry platters of dough and buckets of brined cabbage. The men are hauling logs and rearranging benches like they're preparing for a royal visit. But there's no royalty, only rituals. Today's feast honours a saint, possibly Nicholas, possibly a local martyr. The exact details are a little fuzzy. Even the elder mumbles when pressed. But the point is community, order and humility. You're supposed to fast until the midday liturgy, which means work hungry, pray hungry, smile hungry. You help bake bread. Well, you help burn one loaf. Then you're reassigned to sweeping ash from the fire pit. Fair. Mainstream historical records show that feast days in rural Orthodox villages were paradoxes. Solemn and celebratory, sacred and back-breaking. People didn't eat lavishly until after they'd cleansed body and spirit, and worked harder than on normal days. By mid-morning, you're kneeling on the frozen floor of the church again. Same cold air. Same unreadable icons. But this time, everything is brighter. Literally. Dozens of beeswax candles flicker in little clay holders. The air smells like smoke, wax and dried herbs. The priest arrives in full vestments, layered, gold-trimmed, solemn. His voice is low, steady, echoing across the wooden beams. You recognise some of the same old church Slavonic phrases as before. This time you almost nod in rhythm. Everyone crosses themselves 3 times. You follow suit. It's less chaotic now. You've learned the pattern. Then silence. Deep whole silence. You sit with it, letting the cold soak into your knees. The words wrap around your head. The stillness hang like smoke. Then, release. Outside, bells ring. They're small, cracked, slightly off-key, but they do the job. Feast time. You expect jubilation, dancing, laughter. What you get is more work. Tables are brought outside despite the snow. Food is arranged carefully. Not for eating yet, no. First, it must be blessed. A procession begins. Icons are carried, songs sung, incense waved over pies and pickles, and roasted turnips like they're sacred relics. You're handed a candle, again. Finally, after what feels like a very ceremonial eternity, people begin to eat. You're given your portion on a wooden plate. Black bread, cabbage pie, fermented mushrooms, a sliver of cold fish, and something that looks like jelly but turns out to be horseradish. Surprise, it's the best meal you've had since you arrived, not because it's fancy, it's not, but because it's shared, because it's quietly earned. A man raises a toast with kvass. You raise your mug. He says something about the bear protector. You smile like that makes sense. Someone begins to sing, not a loud, boisterous song, but a low winding chant about saints and seasons and bread that never runs out. Others join, you hum along. Quirky fact. On certain feast days, villagers believe the spirits of ancestors joined the meal. An extra plate might be set out, a crumb left on the doorstep. Today, someone tucks a bit of pie under the bench. You watch. No one mentions it. As the sun dips, the food slows. People lean back, bellies full, eyes soft. A woman tells a story about a raven that stole a ring from a czar's table and cursed a village for 7 years. Everyone listens, nods, adds details. You wonder if it's true. You also wonder if the goat will show up again. It doesn't. By nightfall, you're exhausted. Not from the food, but from the rituals. The motion, the quiet pressure to do everything right. You lie on the straw that night, more tired than usual, but also strangely calm, because today you did everything right. You spilled nothing. You sang badly. You kneeled, fasted, carried, scrubbed, and earned your soup, and no one glared at you. That might be the highest compliment of all. Snow has fallen steadily through the night, blanketing the village in silence. Not the suspicious kind from the goat incident or the tense kind from the tribunal. This is a gentler silence. The kind that makes footsteps sound softer. The kind that muffles even the dog's barks into sleepy echoes. You're awake before the others. It's cold. Of course it's cold. But you've adjusted. The straw bed still itches, but you found the sweet spot where the hay supports your back and doesn't poke you in the spleen. Progress. You dress in near darkness, layering wool and hemp without thinking. The boots, stiff and slightly damp, go on without protest. Even your fingers seem to have resigned themselves to the chill. You've stopped cursing the bath shoes and started respecting them like old grumpy companions. Outside, everything is white. The fences, the roofs, the paths. You can't even tell where the road begins or ends. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs. A door creaks. The village is waking. Winter is here. Fully. Deeply. Unapologetically. And everything has changed. You're no longer the outsider tripping over fence posts or misusing the banya. You know the rhythm now. The invisible rules. How to layer the porridge so the salt hits last. How to warm your hands over the stove without burning your palms. How to nod when someone says something you only half understand. The villagers nod back now. Today's work is simple, but heavy. The snow has buried the woodshed again. Your task, dig it out. Not glamorous, not ceremonial, just cold, wet, back-breaking effort. You grab a wooden shovel, its edges dulled from generations of use, and begin clearing. The snow is deep, almost waist-high in places, and it clings to your clothing like it knows you by name. Your breath comes out in bursts. Your hands ache, but you move with purpose. By mid-morning, others join you. They bring baskets and sleds. The kids help, sort of. Mostly by throwing snow at each other and accidentally knocking over the pile you just made. But no one's upset. Not today. Today's about preparation. Because now, everything is survival. Mainstream historians agree that the Russian peasant winter wasn't just a season, it was a siege. You prepared for it like a war, stockpiled food, triple-wrapped windows, salted everything. Life didn't stop. It compressed. Time slowed. Days shortened. Everything bent toward one purpose: endure until spring. You haul the firewood indoors, stacking it beside the stove. You refill the water pail. You scrape ice off the roof's edge. Simple things, necessary things. In the afternoon, the wind picks up. Not violent, just persistent. It whispers through the thatch and under the doors like it's testing the village's defences. You pull your coat tighter. The smoke from the stove gets caught in the draft and swirls around the room like lazy ghosts. Inside, the mood shifts. People speak more softly. They stay closer to the fire. Meals are slower. Broths stretch longer. No one wastes anything. You notice that even the animals are quieter. The goat snoozes under its straw blanket. The chickens roost early. The dog curls up beside the oven, sighing deeply. Someone starts mending a coat. Someone else slices dried apples and hangs them near the stove. A boy plays with a carved wooden horse, galloping it across the table in slow, looping circles. And you stir the pot, literally. You're trusted now to keep the midday kasha from sticking. It's not glamorous, but it's a promotion. The old woman watches you for a moment, then nods and leaves you to it. You smile and stir. Quirky detail. Some believed that a well-stirred pot could calm the house, especially during storms. It was said that steady hands during cooking helped keep evil spirits or cabin fever from taking hold. Today, your hand is steady. As evening falls, the wind grows stronger. Snow races past the windows in frantic flurries. The shutters rattle. You hear someone outside hammering a board across a chicken coop just in case. You help seal the doorframe with bundles of straw. You wedge cloth between the gaps. You bank the stove, stacking the coals just right so it will burn all night. You're tired, but it's a clean kind of tired. The elder calls for quiet, a short prayer, not dramatic, just a whispered hope for warmth, for health, for spring. You bow your head. This time, not because you're copying everyone else, but because you mean it. You lie down in the straw, pulling your blanket tight. Someone hums a lullaby, just a few notes. The fire flickers low, the wind howls outside, and for the first time you don't mind it, because inside this creaky wooden hut, under a roof of snow and smoke, you belong. And now, as the wind whispers across the eaves and the embers glow faintly in the stove, you let your breathing slow. The work is done, the chores completed, the goat accounted for. You feel the scratch of the straw beneath you, familiar now, almost comforting. You shift your feet deeper under the blanket, letting the warmth gather and hold. Around you, the village has settled into the stillness of night. Every sigh, every rustle, part of a lullaby older than memory. The snow outside continues to fall, quiet, steady, wrapping the rooftops, muffling the paths, softening the world into one long unbroken hush. You remember the firewood stacked, the soup that didn't burn, the nods of approval, the quiet understanding that somehow you made it through. Tomorrow will bring more cold, more work, maybe even another surprise visit from the bear. But not tonight. Tonight there are no tasks, no accidents, no spirits to appease, only warmth, only breath, only sleep. So close your eyes, let the flickering images of firelight and forest, of bread and snow and softly spoken words melt into the back of your mind. There's nothing left to do now but rest. You've earned it. And just like that, the village fades into stillness, into silence, into dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.